I was desperate to make this video, so desperate in fact that I'm actually recording this with my phone. And I'm wearing a shirt and tie, and I hope that signifies that this video is actually quite important. Haven't made much music content on the channel, and thought that today was the perfect day to start, because today is a very important day for me. As if some of my friends and family are watching this, you may know that my favourite band is Frightened Rabbit, the band from Glasgow, and they were an amazing band, but unfortunately last year, their lead singer Scott Hutchison committed suicide, and essentially what would have occurred today was his 38th birthday. So if I just move my chair here a bit, actually, yeah. I'm just going to talk for a bit about why I love Frightened Rabbit and sort of give my tribute to Scott, and yeah. So Frightened Rabbit are my personal favourite band of all time. I was introduced to them recently by a friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine, and always I just started listening to all the songs after their recommendation, and I discovered upon their album, The Midnight Organ Fight, and I listened to it in whole, and it was the most beautiful album I think I'd ever heard in my entire life. And essentially that's what I'm going to talk about today, the Midnight Organ Fight in particular, because that's my favourite album of all time, and I think it's important that I sort of share that with you guys, especially with doing music content. So, the Midnight Organ Fight is one of those albums you hear and you don't think you'll ever come back from it. It's an incredibly emotional and incredibly it's a breathtaking album, and it consists of 14 songs, I'm pretty sure, and every single one of them is filled with the most heartfelt and utterly just beautiful lyrics, and my personal favourite song from the whole thing is Floating in the Fourth, probably, because it's the one I listen to the most, and it's the one that's really impacted me the most. And the interesting thing about Floating in the Fourth is it's about Scott imagining his own death and imagining himself committing suicide. And unfortunately, that was the way he died, through suicide. And yeah, it's a very, very powerful thing, mental health. It's powerful, but it can be easily impacted and easily broken at any second, genuinely. It's just, we have power inside of us that even we don't know about. I think that's the scary thing about your mind, and especially with your mental health. You have power inside your mind that you don't really have control of, and Scott was open about this, because the band name Frightened Rabbit was actually a name given to him by his mother, as he was very socially awkward and very shy as a child during social events. So she called him her little frightened rabbit, and then obviously I assume that name sort of stuck with him, and obviously it did, because now it's the band name. And so Scott was never afraid to talk about his mental health issues, but that's the scary thing. Even talking about them, even though you're talking about them, you can still feel that there's no place to go. And I think Scott's very open about that, especially in his music, and every single one of the songs is beautifully made, beautifully played on guitar, beautifully sung by Scott, and yeah. Now back on mainly Floating in the Fourth, it's an amazing track, and it's literally just like, it's the second last song on the album, but I would consider that the album closer. I would consider that the showstopper. And yeah, it is just a very, very awesome little song, and the lyrics of it are incredibly powerful, especially when you relate it to Scott's death, because Scott committed suicide by jumping off the Forth Road Bridge in Edinburgh, and yeah, and in the song Floating in the Fourth, that's the way he imagined he'd commit suicide. And then another lyric in Floating in the Fourth is it has to do with a boat in the port for me. And so yeah, it's in Edinburgh, the Port Edgar, and a boat in the port for him. And Fortunately, there wasn't one for him. I think it's that thing of committing suicide and immediately forgetting it, so hoping that there's a boat in the port for you. But I think the way that how open Scott was incredible, and I think that it's actually some of the living survivors of or maybe some people who still have mental health issues actually weren't as open as Scott was, which makes you, or personally, I don't know about you, but personally makes me really scared about mental health, and because I've had dark thoughts at the worst of times, just have dark thoughts with a lot of stress on, and I think the terrible thing about it is that it's inevitable. It's like dark thoughts are going to come your way whether you like it or not, and that's the scary thing. You never know when it's going to happen. It's going to creep on you. I think actually worrying about it is when it comes. That's when you start worrying about it, is actually when it comes. See, that's how powerful it is. You don't actually know it's coming. And yeah, I think that's what Floating in the Fourth represented to me, and when I first heard it, I was in a ball of tears. Seriously, it was just the most incredibly just heartbreaking yet incredibly fascinating and enjoyable album as a whole. Well, forgetting about talking about the album now, but the song in particular was a real showstopper for me. And yeah, just the whole album. I want to point out the Modern Leper, the first song in the whole album, and it is it's a great opener because it's very acoustic, but it also has some a hint of synthesizer and instrumental as well, which was it's a perfect way to start an album. Very calm song, but actually it's not calm. It's a midway between very loud and very calm, and I think that's what Scott was amazing at, being able to find a balance that in your mind is immediately like 50-50. It's like your mind can tell, oh, this is going to be a 50-50 song. I've not had that with many songs in my life. It's just it's a song about confusion, I find. And My Backwards Walk as well is a song in there. And one of the lyrics in the song is, I'm working on erasing you, I just don't have the proper tools. And I think that's also representing love in a bad relationship, but also representing mental health issues and doing whatever you can to get rid of dark thoughts and all your problems. And I think that's how Scott should be a role model for people, not because he committed suicide, but how he was open about it and how you need to talk about it, and that's how he makes it better. And that's how I think Scott was always seen as someone who's very happy and very very energetic and very let's go for it kind of people. And I think it's just such an incredible song, My Backwards Walk, and it's got an amazing tune to it. And literally the chorus is it's just like one of the most calming, soothing things ever, and it's that midway between rocky and calm, and that baffles me every time I think of Scott's music, and every time I think of Frightened Rabbit. The way they were able to do that was incredibly awesome and incredibly exciting as well, because I never heard another band like them. Genuinely, it was just such a cool thing hearing that album for the first time in full, because I think I'd heard Poke, Modern Leper, and Floating in the Fourth. So the three songs I heard from the album before I heard it for the first time. And actually, Head Rolls Off as well, which I'll get onto in a sec, because that's an incredibly pivotal song for the whole band, and Scott was represented by in general. And but before I get into that, I'm just going to talk about the album for a bit and my personal experience just hearing it, which was just incredibly fascinating and incredibly cool. And by the time I was done, I was like, it's a bit shaken. I was a bit shook because as an album, it's the perfect mix of just long songs, short songs, average songs, songs without lyrics where it just focuses on beat, and songs with very few lyrics. And if it is a song with very few lyrics, those lyrics will be repeated. And I think that's the incredible thing that Scott was able to do. Just find a perfect balance. Most of them are songs with words, but when the songs without words and the very short songs come in, you're like, oh, I like that. I really, really like that. It's an incredibly tear-jerking and heartwarming 48 minutes of an album. So the album came out in 2008, and last year was the 10th anniversary, and for it they were making a compilation album of, it was the songs sung by their friends and their favourite artists. And it was meant to come out last year, but obviously Scott committed suicide, so it'd probably feel a bit disrespectful and wrong. So they released it this year instead as kind of the 11th anniversary thing. And this is it. It's the exact same artwork, just done very differently, and same at the back. But yeah, it's got some amazing people in it. It's got Becky Claro, daughter, Oxford Collapse, Sarah Silverman, Katie Erkin, and also you've got people like Ben Gibbard and Craig Finn, who are also really, really good as well. And Twilight Sad as well, who actually knew Scott very, very well. Don't know if I mentioned Biffy Clyro, but they did it as well, and they did awesome. They did an awesome little cover of The Modern Leper. That was that's a complete mess, but it's still awesome. And that's why I love Biffy Clyro. Messy songs. But anyway, yeah, and it just shows you, and in that song, or in that album, sorry, the compilation or cover album, it just shows you how widely the songs have spread and how you can do them in many different styles with many different genre techniques, and yet it still comes out incredibly fascinating, incredibly beautiful. And I think that's the important thing you have to remember when writing songs. Will it be universally spread, and will people be interested? And can people relate to it no matter what style of music they're into? But you have to stay true to your roots. And that's what Scott always did. And I think that's why I love Midnight Organ Fight so much. It's just Michael from Oxford Collapse sort of described the Midnight Organ Fight as Scott ripping his heart open and pouring it out for the whole world to see. That is the perfect way of describing the Midnight Organ Fight for anyone who hasn't heard it. And I think if we're going to get into Fret and Rabbit, Midnight Organ Fight is the first album you head to. And yeah, but also Head Rolls Off, which is probably the last thing I'll mention, because I don't want to go on for ages. I just want to make it a nice little video as my tribute to Scott, and generally the Midnight Organ Fight. And Head Rolls Off, there's a line in it that goes, "While I'm alive, I'll make tiny changes to Earth." And that's became Scott's little catchphrase. And that's the one lyric that stuck with the band and stuck with Scott and all the fans, really. And it's incredibly impactful. While I'm alive, I'll make tiny changes to Earth. And just think about that for a minute. While I'm alive, I'll make tiny changes to Earth. I think tiny changes is all you can do. You can't make big changes because you can't reverse them. You can make tiny changes, know that you're going on the right track, and keep doing them, or know that you're not doing the right thing, and then you can reverse. So that's the important thing about making tiny changes, and that was actually the name of the cover album, Tiny Changes, a celebration of Fried Rabbit's The Midnight Organ Fight. So yeah, and this May, they have set up a charity called Tiny Changes, set up by the Hutchison family in memory of Scott, and it focuses on young people struggling with mental health and depression-based issues in Scotland. And I think it's amazing because depression and suicide takes so many lives every year, and it's always preventable. And the fact is, depression's inevitable. We're all gonna get we might not be diagnosed with it, but we're all gonna feel depressed, and that'll be really bad. That'll be really bad when it comes, and for those who have it, know that it's really bad. And it's important that we spread the message of it always being preventable, because and the fact that help's always out there, because we can fight this, and there's no need to fight this, because taking your own life is your own decision. Getting cancer is not your own decision. Getting murdered is not your own decision. But suicide's always preventable, and I want you to realise that. And in below, I'm going to link the playlist for the whole of the Midnight Organ fight and a link to the Tiny Changes charity. You don't have to donate anything, although it would be greatly appreciated towards them. But just read the bio of the charity and read some stuff in the charity, because it's a truly amazing story and something that should be remembered and live on forever. That's the importance of Scott's story. Not all the fame, money, and love in the world can make you happy. But loving yourself is probably the most important thing. And being happy with the decisions you made and knowing that you can go fix those tiny changes that you did incorrect. And you can fix them. And the fact is, if those tiny changes are inevitable, you can improve upon them. You can improve upon yourself. And that's the sad thing Scott struggled to do during the last, let's say, few months of his life, roughly. And that's also the other thing I want to say about this. Talk about your problems. It's okay. Because I also want to pair this with the Etika situation that happened this year, which was also very, very sad. You just have to talk about your problems, and suicide's not the only way out. I'd like you to hear Scott's last tweet read out by me over a microphone right now. This was the last thing he said to anyone, or the last thing he did to communicate with his fans. I'd like to just show you it right now, because it is really important. I'll see you all later, guys. Thank you all very much for listening. Be so good to everyone you love. It's not a given. I'm so annoyed that it's not. I didn't live by that standard and it kills me. Please, hug your loved ones. I'm away now. Thanks.